Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new, my name is Bobby. Guys, today we're going to check out the channel Professor Jiang Explains. Professor Jiang is a university professor and lately he's been absolutely dismantling Christianity and has been praising Islam. A very interesting character, and he just uploaded a video on how Paul hijacked Christianity. So let's watch this lecture, guys, but before we do so, as always, if you enjoy my content, leave me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and check out the links in the description box below to further support my work. I'm not just saying that, check it out, guys, support the channel. Alright, and now with no further ado, let's have a look.
The major individual in the Bible who is a Hellenized Jew in the Roman Empire is named Paul. And he is credited with most of the writing of the New Testament. About a third of the New Testament, which is the Christian Bible, either is written by Paul or it's about Paul. So that's why we believe that not Jesus, but Paul is the real founder of Christianity.
Exactly right, very well put, and this is something that I try to convey to my Christian viewers. First and foremost, yet again for the 1000th time, I come from a Christian Orthodox background. I was a Christian myself before I accepted Islam, so I'm not a born Muslim. I'm not somebody that grew up in a Muslim family, hasn't seen any other religion, and now is just promoting Islam on YouTube. No, not at all. I come from Christianity. And what I like to convey to Christians here is that Christianity, the concept of Christianity, church Christianity, is not really following Jesus. Even following the Bible is not really following Jesus. You are following Paul. The New Testament, as he said correctly here, has been written by Paul or is about Paul. So the real question is, of course, what were the real teachings of Jesus Christ? Paul persecuted the early Christians, man. He went out and killed the real followers of Jesus Christ. This is what I try to convey here. It is great that you want to follow Jesus Christ. I want to follow Jesus Christ as well. I want to follow all the prophets because I believe that they all came with the same message before people obstructed that message. And this is what Paul did to the original message of Jesus. You're not following Jesus. As a Christian, quote-unquote Christian, you're not following Jesus. You're following Paul.
Okay? Christianity, again, is not by Jesus. It's not a religion by Jesus. It's a religion about Jesus.
Exactly right. Just like Buddhism, pardon my excitement here, I'm going to lay back now and let the video run. Just one last interruption before I do so. When he said, this is the religion about Jesus, exactly right. This is what it is, man. And this is what I saw worldwide. I traveled the world and I saw it. People make religions about the messenger. Buddhism, Christianity. The Christians do not really follow what Jesus taught, and the Buddhists do not really follow what Buddha taught. They made a religion about Buddha. They made a religion about Jesus. The Shia Muslims made a religion about Ali, etc., etc., you name it. It is always the same thing, but this is not what religion should be about. It should be about monotheism. It should be about you submitting your will to God alone. All right, let the video run.
The story of Paul that don't make any sense, okay? The first thing that doesn't make sense is like, who is this guy, right? He has all this power and money, and he can do whatever he wants, and no one can touch him, all right? So that's the first big question. Second big question is, why does he convert, right? His conversion story doesn't make any sense. We're like, okay, well, because he saw Jesus. Okay, that's fine, but guess what, guys? After Jesus talks to him, Jesus sort of disappears from the story.
Yeah, it's not really
and
Jesus.
You would think
it's
that
a vision.
If Jesus was so important to Paul, Paul would quote from Jesus, right? But he doesn't quote from Jesus.
Ever.
Jesus has a lot of message, a lot of sayings, but Paul rarely quotes from him. Okay? But not only that, we already said that the message of Jesus and the message of Paul are very different. Jesus believed the kingdom of God was within us. For our generosity, for our mercy, we can achieve salvation. Paul taught everyone it's believe in Jesus that will allow you to achieve salvation. And only believe in Jesus. You can do as much good as you want, but if you don't believe in Jesus, you'll be damned to hell. So all those Buddhists, all those Hindus, all those Zoroastrians who are doing good in the world, too bad. They will be burned in hell. Okay? And that goes against a lot of the teachings of Jesus. Okay? So he did convert, but he's not spreading the gospel of Jesus. All right? All right.
Yeah, which means he didn't convert. The crucial point here is that Paul never met Jesus. Allegedly, he had a vision. Can we confirm this? Not at all. One vision on the road to Damascus, and there he sees Jesus, and that somehow makes him convert to Christianity. But it's not true at all, because then he goes out and creates his own interpretation of the religion. He basically creates a new religion, call it Paulianity, if you will. He never converted. He tells the people a story about Jesus Christ. He bases it on the early Christians and then invents his own religion that is then used by the Roman Empire as a state religion to control their peasants.
The other question then is, why is he focusing on organization? Okay? Why is he focusing on organization? The heart of religion is spiritual truth, right? But Paul doesn't really care about that. He cares about the organization, the church, who's in charge, how many members we're attracting, how we can appeal to them more, how to resolve internal political disputes within the church. That's what he cares about. That's very odd.
To make it the state religion of Rome,
Okay?
That's the whole
and then
point.
The last question then is, why does he get in trouble with the Jews? And why did the Romans save him? Okay? So these are questions. Now, let's first go over the Christian explanation. And the Christian explanation is, Paul was part of the divine plan.
Yeah, of
Okay?
course. Guided by the Holy Spirit.
Jesus
Amen.
brought truth into the world, right? The truth of Jesus, that's what Jesus teaches. But it was Paul who created the structure in the organization that allowed Christianity to spread. Okay? So, an analogy or a comparison is the story of McDonald's. You guys all know McDonald's,
franchise,
right?
A franchise.
Well, guess what? In 1950s,
But that should have been the job of the early disciples anyways. He said to them to go out into the nations, not to Paul.
McDonald's was one restaurant in California. It had amazing hamburgers. And it really had the best hamburgers. And a man named Ray Kroc visited this restaurant. And it was being run by the McDonald brothers. That's why it's called McDonald's, okay? When Ray Kroc says to the brothers, you know what? You guys have an amazing restaurant. Let me scale it out. Let me convince others to open McDonald's around America and the world. This is called the franchise model, okay? The franchise model. The franchise model. And so the brother said, yeah, sure. And what Ray Kroc did was he drove everywhere, like Paul. And he had these meetings, like Paul, where he convinced people of the American dream, like Paul. Ray Kroc said to everyone, if you open McDonald's, you will get rich and you will live the American dream. Right? Paul said to everyone, if you believe in Jesus, you will achieve salvation. And because Ray Kroc was such an amazing salesperson, McDonald's eventually became the largest restaurant empire in the world, right? Same thing with Paul. Because Paul was just a convincing salesman, Christianity became the most dominant religion in the world. So this is all part of God's plan. Okay?
Yeah,
It's
not
very
only
similar
a salesman,
to the story of
he was
McDonald's.
persecuting the Christians.
Here's the problem,
he was
guys.
killing them.
Jesus was not selling hamburgers. In fact, Jesus hated hamburgers, right? The central message of Jesus is wealth is wrong. Business is wrong. Hierarchy is wrong. What matters is the spiritual truth in your heart.
To an extent. To an
All right?
extent. I don't
So-
fully agree here.
Even though this is the Christian belief that both are part of the divine plan, and Paul was basically Jesus' business manager, okay? Problem is, Jesus didn't want a business manager.
Jesus wasn't there anymore.
And Jesus believed that it was our own individual responsibility to discover our own truths through him. Okay? So, what are some other explanations?
Yeah, I don't fully agree, and this is actually a very Christian perspective on the matter, that the truth is within, it is written in your heart, la-di-da-di-da. Jesus was a Torah-observant Jew, so he said himself that he didn't come to abolish the law. However, Paul did that. Paul abolished the law. So therefore, the way that he describes it here, I would say it's actually the other way around. Jesus didn't just say, just follow yourself and find God in your heart. No, Jesus said that you have to obey by the Mosaic law. Paul, on the other hand, said that you shouldn't.
For Paul. Okay. All right. So, I mean, the most basic answer for people who hate Paul is he was just an opportunist, a charlatan. Okay? He saw a business opportunity. Everyone loved Jesus. Jesus had gone viral, right? He had gone viral. And he was a meme now around the world. And so he wanted to take advantage of that. He wanted to monetize that. The problem with this is...
I wouldn't say monetize.
He worked really hard, man. He traveled all around the Roman Empire to spread the message. He was fanatical about it, okay? And opportunists are not fanatical. They're kind of lazy. So I don't really buy this idea that he was an opportunist. He really believed in what he was doing. He was driven by a sense of mission. Okay? And also, guys, remember, if he's a...
I personally believe that he was driven by the mission to get the Roman state religion instated. This was his primary objective.
Roman citizen, and his parents are Roman citizens, then he's probably wealthy himself. He doesn't really need this money. Also, what's important for us to understand is Paul comes from a very well-educated background. He's very wealthy. He speaks Greek. He writes Greek beautifully. He's classically educated. He doesn't want to deal with James the Just, who is not well-educated, right? He doesn't want to deal with these people. So why is he dealing with these people? Right? So I don't really buy this explanation. Another explanation is secret conspiracy. And the idea here is Paul and maybe many who supported him hated the Roman Empire. And they believed Christianity would be a weapon that would eventually destroy the Roman Empire, which is what happened historically. That's 300, 400 years in the future. How could Paul know that? And also, what does Paul have against the Roman Empire? Really, right? He's beneficiary of the Roman Empire. He's wealthy, his parents are wealthy. All right? So, another explanation, which, by the way, I've never heard before, but which I do believe. All right? So take this with a grain of salt. But I believe he was a spy for the Roman Empire. All right?
For the Roman Empire. But that's not a conspiracy. He was working for the Roman Empire. We all know that.
So let me explain the idea here.
Spy. Yeah.
What is he doing? And, all right. So the Jews have always been a problem for empires, both the Greek Empire and the Roman Empire.
Huh.
Why? Because the Greeks and the Romans are pagans. They celebrate pagan gods.
Mm-hmm.
But the Jews believe that their God is the only God and every other God is false. And so they refuse the authority of the empire. And this has led to many wars, okay? From 167 to 160 BCE, there's something called the Maccabean Revolt against the Seleucid Empire. They lasted 7 years, killed a lot of people, okay? And then there'll be the Romans and the Jews will fight 3 major wars. From 66 to 73 CE, and this is around the time of Paul. The first war will be fought. The Romans will burn the temple down and ban all Jews from Jerusalem. And the Romans think through this aggression, the Jews will be cowed. They'll be scared, right? No. It makes them even more angry, so that 2 more wars are fought from 115 to 117, and then the third war will be from 132 to 136. Okay? So the Jews are fanatical. That's what gives the Jews power. They're a poor province of the Roman Empire.
Could be.
But they're fanatical. And guess what? Romans respect fanaticism. Okay? Remember, 216 BCE. Hannibal invades Italy. And he destroys all the Roman armies who are against him. In the Battle of Cannae, he has killed at least 20% of the Roman adult male population and a third of the Senate. And at this point, the Romans should have surrendered and talked peace, right? But the Romans are fanatical. They refuse to surrender, and eventually they're able to destroy Carthage. Okay? So now the Romans see the Jews, who again, it's a poor, small province in the Roman Empire, and they continue to rebel. So this fanaticism of the Jews, it both scares and it awes the Romans. Okay? They understand, the Romans above all understand how powerful fanaticism is. Fanaticism is the ultimate weapon. It cannot be defeated. And because there's a diaspora, a Jewish diaspora, it can never be rooted out. Okay? You can destroy Jerusalem, which is what they did, but there are Jews all around the world. So you can never destroy this fanaticism. And because of the long history of the Jews, this fanaticism only grows through persecution and through suffering. Okay? So you have to somehow destroy this fanaticism if you are to win this war against the Jews. And there are three central beliefs underlying this Jewish fanaticism. All right? The first is the idea of purity. Why is it that if the Jews are God's chosen people, they're always being pushed around by these larger empires like the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, and the Romans? And the answer is because we Jews have not been pure enough. We have not been loyal enough to Yahweh. So it is only through purity that will allow us to eventually triumph over our enemies. Okay? Otherwise, we will continue to be bullied by others. Second is the idea of persecution complex. The persecution complex. The entire world is against us because we are God's chosen people. And therefore, we must stand united and stay pure. Who the Jews really hated were the Jews who assimilated, like Paul.
Yeah, it's a preservation.
Right? They hated
doctrine.
these people because they were traitors to the nation of Israel. All right, second belief. And then there's
That's
a
why
third
they
belief,
never assimilate,
which
no
is
matter where they go.
the coming of the Messiah. Don't worry about today, okay? This pain, this suffering, this persecution, it's all part of the divine plan. It's testing us. It is making us strong. Eventually, the Messiah, the anointed one, will come from heaven and lead us into a final battle against all our enemies, the Roman Empire, and we will destroy them. And then we will establish the nation of God, the kingdom of heaven on earth. Okay? And so these are the three major beliefs that underpin Jewish fanaticism, and it makes the Jews almost invincible because it makes them fearless. They're not afraid to die. Dying is part of the divine plan. Suffering is all part of the process of achieving the kingdom of heaven on earth. It's a responsibility to die for the faith. Okay?
Yeah, exactly right. But at the same time, it will persevere their lineage, and it was successful until this very day.
All right.
That makes sense.
So now that we understand this Jewish fanaticism, we can now understand why Paul is doing what he's doing, right? Think about this. Purity means absolute obedience to the law of Moses, right? But what Paul's saying is, no, guys, circumcision. Circumcision is we don't have to enforce circumcision because we want more non-Jews into our religion. Okay? Why is circumcision such a big deal? Well, because circumcision is basically what separates the Jews into a different group of people in any community. Why? Because in most cities, there's a place called gymnasium. The gymnasium is really the heart and center of life in the community. It's where men go to do sports and athletics, like wrestle and run, okay? The thing about the gymnasium is everyone goes in naked, right? And why is this a problem? Because if you're Jewish, people know right away you're Jewish. Therefore, it's hard for you to go into the gymnasium because you're being ridiculed by the Greeks. Therefore, there's no way for the Jews to associate with the Greeks and other people. Okay? Does that make sense? That's why circumcision is so important. Once you say to the Jewish people, you don't need to be circumcised, you just have to have faith in Jesus, then it's easier for them to assimilate into the larger culture around them. Right? Persecution complex. Jews are being persecuted. Why? Because they're not Roman citizens. Right? Let's go back to the story of Jesus. Why did he get persecuted? Why did he die? Because he was not a Roman citizen. If he were a Roman citizen, then Pontius Pilate would have protected him from the Jews who wanted to kill him. Just like how the Roman soldiers protected Paul from those Jews who wanted to kill him. So guys.
Potentially, but Jesus was seen as somebody that was causing upheaval in the Roman Empire, and therefore I don't really believe that if he was a Roman citizen, the outcome would have been a different one. I believe that they wanted to persecute him because they saw a danger in his message.
Focus on being a Roman citizen.
And I should say as well, they didn't see a danger in Paul's message. Why I confirm yet again that I believe that Paul was working for the Roman Empire and he simply was manifesting the state religion. That's all.
And you can
it's not that deep.
Believe anything you want. You will no longer be persecuted. You'll be part of the Roman Empire. Right? And the last thing is the coming of the Messiah. Right? Jews believe the Messiah is going to come and lead them into final victory against all their enemies, especially the Roman Empire. But what Paul is saying is this. The Messiah has already come. He's Jesus. And Jesus taught a message of eternal salvation. Internal salvation. To recognize the evil within you and to become a better person. So if you want to be saved, you must believe that we are born evil and Jesus has come to cleanse us of our evil.
Yeah, complete nonsense.
Jesus was a prophet of peace. He had nothing against the Roman Empire. He was fighting against evil in the world.
Yeah, he said, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. He definitely wasn't against the Roman Empire as such.
So, if these three things are true, then fanaticism will be destroyed. Now, obviously, if you're a fanatic, you don't believe any of this crap, okay? But Paul's message was not for fanatical Jews. They were still a minority. His message were for diaspora Jews like him who were stuck between the Roman Empire and the Jewish faith. Right? They were part of the Jewish diaspora. Maybe their fathers were Greek and their mothers were Jewish. Okay? And these are a lot of people. So Paul's message was for these people. You can still be Jewish if you believe in Jesus.
Man, this is a very long speech, but honestly, it all boils down to giving the Gentiles a way into Judaism, but not true Judaism, because they would have never adopted it, and therefore mix paganism with Judaism, and then you have the Christianity that Paul taught. That's all.
Then you can now assimilate.
It's fairly simple.
Into the Roman Empire. And this will free you to believe whatever you want.
Not really. Okay. Not to believe whatever you want. To believe in that brand Christianity. Paulianity, yet again.
This is Paul's mission. Now, then the question then is, why is Paul doing this? Why would Paul do this? And I think the answer is this. I don't want to say Paul is an opportunist or he's evil. I believe he was also a believer in his mission. His mission was what? To save his people. If you want to continue to live within the Roman Empire, you have to adapt yourself. You have to make compromises. You can't wait for the Messiah to come save you. You have to save yourself by adapting to the Roman Empire. And look, there are lots of advantages to the Roman Empire. You can become very happy and prosperous if you play by the rules of the Roman Empire, like he did. Okay? So in many ways, what's odd about Paul is he teaches us that Jesus is the Messiah, but in his heart, and you can tell by his writings, he himself believes he's really the Messiah who has come to save his people. And that's why he's so fanatical about building the church of Christianity. The church that will eventually become Christianity, okay? Again, at this point in history, they're not Christians. They're still Jews. Okay? But there will be a lot of consequences because Paul is doing this. He radically changes the meaning of faith and religion. All right? Because, again, the story of Jesus doesn't really make any sense. And his story doesn't make any sense either. Okay? He's lying about who he is. So he creates a new concept. And he radically changes the concept of faith, okay? Before, faith is what you experience. Now faith is something that you must believe. Right? He introduces the idea of miracles now. If something can be explained, it's because it's a miracle. All right? And this is a new idea that really didn't exist before. And the use of miracles is to explain the contradictions or the inconsistencies in the story of the Bible. Okay?
There are plenty of those, man.
So that's one major revolution of Paul's teachings. Another is the idea of tradition. Tradition is more important than the Bible, okay? So the stories, the interpretation of the Bible is now more important than the Bible itself. And Paul's church will eventually become the Catholic Church. And one thing about the Catholic Church is you are not allowed to read the Bible. The Bible is sacred, it's forbidden. Only priests are allowed to read the Bible.
It used to be like that.
Because the fear is if you read the Bible, you might misinterpret the Word of God. Okay? You don't have the spiritual power in order to fully interpret the Bible properly. Okay? All right? Okay, so there are lots of major changes to the idea of religion because of Paul's work. All right, so that is my central argument about Paul.
This video reached over 230,000 views, so I was expecting a little bit more, I have to say. But overall, we're on the same page here. Yes, Paul was a Pharisee originally. He was working for the Sanhedrin's authority, I think that's how you pronounce it, for the Jews ultimately, and he was persecuting the early Christians. However, as I said many times here, later on, Paulianity becomes the state religion of Rome, and therefore it is really not far-fetched and not a conspiracy theory to then say, well, Paul worked for the Roman Empire. He was directly responsible for the adoption of his version of Christianity. Anyways, what is really important to understand here, especially for the Christians watching, is that if you follow Paul, you're not following Jesus Christ. You really have to take it up on faith, man. You have to say, just as he explained there in the beginning, well, all of this is the divine plan. Paul has been guided by the Holy Spirit. Jesus has appeared to him. But why are the messages differing then? And moreover, why did Paul get into an argument with James, the brother of Jesus? That is very important, very strange, right? Why would that happen? How can Paul have the update even though he wasn't there during Jesus' ministry? Question after question after question. The early followers, then still led by Jesus' brother, were still participating in the temple. They were not distinguishable from other Jews. The main difference, of course, was that they believed that the Messiah has come. The other Jews believed that he still has yet to come. That was the main schism here, the main difference in the beginning, but nothing else changed. They still observed the Mosaic law, they didn't eat pork, they got circumcised, etc., you name it. But then Paul comes with his version, and they clash. The brother of Jesus and Paul clashes. But now Christians somehow assume that Paul must have gotten it right. After getting a vision of Jesus where he tells them, you can eat whatever you like, Paul, just go straight ahead. It is absolutely mind-boggling to me, man. You would believe that after 2020, most people would understand that there is a lot of fakery in the mainstream media, a lot of fakery in the news, right? So now just imagine how fake history must be. Do you really believe that the people that compiled history for you so you can learn it like a good little sheep in school had your best interest at heart, right? All of this is true, 100% factual. Yes, just ask the historians. It happened exactly like that, man. Oh my God, it is so pathetic. It is so obviously fake. No matter which part of history you start digging into, you will always see so many discrepancies, man. So many different stories being tied together to give you a watered down narrative so you can believe it and you can go on with your life. It's ridiculous, man. When it comes down to true revelation, we should, of course, distinguish between true revelation and then history. When it comes down to Christianity, what revelation do you follow? Tell me, which revelation do you follow? Where's the revelation that Jesus spoke? Where's the revelation that has been channeled through him? Or moreover, if you believe that Jesus is God, then where is his revelation? Where are his words? Where can you read them? Oh, well, the Bible, the Bible. Man, there are just a few sayings of Jesus Christ, supposedly. We're talking about a complete book, something that Jesus left you with. There is nothing. The only thing that you got is alleged autobiographical accounts called the Gospels, written by anonymous authors about Jesus. Yet again, and this is really what it boils down to, man. Is your religion coming from God? Was Jesus the messenger of God? Or are you getting a watered-down Pauline version about Jesus? This is the religion about Jesus. Jesus had some followers, he went to Galilee, he made wine out of water, yada yada yada. You're just talking about Jesus. You're just following assumptions, man. It's really annoying, truly, because I went through this, man, for many, many years. I really want to understand what is the message of God. What did Jesus truly say? And in the church, you get more and more questions, but no answers. And then on top of that, yeah, now believe in the Trinity, man. This is really what it is. Yoo-hoo, Trinity, Jesus is God, yay. It's a mess. You don't have clear-cut revelation from Jesus. No, you have altered texts by Paul. If you follow Paul, have fun. Go with it, man. I couldn't care less. But please don't call yourself a Christian. Alright guys, but this is it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, leave it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and check out the links in the description box below to further support my work. Thank you very much for that, and as always, may God bless you all. Much love and peace.
يا نفس إن لم تظفري لا تجزعي